Hey, what's up everybody, this is OurMusicBox, and today I wanted to show you guys a variation of my most recent Amara build that is built around the Nimbus Legendary class mod that creates a cloud of elemental damage after you hit any enemy with your action skill ability that applies status effects that can just do an absolutely ridiculous amount of damage per second. That build I was able to get over 100k damage a second on the status effect damage, and this one is going to be a little less just straight single target damage, but this build is going to be much more rounded and a bit more focus on mobbing. But also, as you see in the footage, it's still able to kill bosses very easily and do a ridiculous amount of damage to just single targets. So let's first just go into the main thing you need, which is the legendary class mod, the Nimbus, which, as I said, when you use an action skill on something, the first thing that it damages, which it doesn't actually technically have to damage, you can use a phase rest on something, and it will be considered that. So it'll spawn the cloud, and it spawns this cloud. Now, the cloud doesn't do much damage by itself. I think it ticks for like 200 a second for me, but with this cloud, it will apply the status effect of your weapon. It'll do that as base damage, and other like talents and even some damage, some gun damage increases and stuff like that will increase the damage, which will give you a ridiculously high status effect. This is the only thing you need for this build, but the highest damage status effect on a weapon is the Kill O the Wisp, which you can get a bunch of different variations of this. So this is the highest one. You can go to like 9,900 a second. I went with the 9,000 one because it has such a good anointed on it, even though I didn't use it in the video. But this is the best weapon for this as well. So let's get right into the talents. Okay, so for the talents, we're going to actually go into the abilities we're using first because a bunch of the talents kind of synergize with this. So we're going to be using Ties That Bind, specifically for mobbing, since this build is much more rounded and much better at mobbing. We're using Ties That Bind, which basically you grasp an enemy and everything around it gets linked, taking 35% of the damage dealt. And there's a bunch of synergies with this that we'll go into when we get to those talents. We're using Allure, and this is really good because we also have another talent that increases the size of this, and our cloud, anything that is in the cloud will take the damage per second and can get the status effect applied to them really quickly. So on the main target is where the cloud would spawn, and since other stuff is getting pulled around them, they'll be in the cloud too, so they can get the status effect on them very easily as well, which will pretty much just kill anything you put the status effect on for the most part. And whatever element you want to use, whatever is better for what you're using. This one I was doing Slaughter Star 3000, so I clearly want Shock, and there's a lot of Shock bosses, so it's very good for that. If you're facing bosses with just without shields or armor, you're definitely going to want Soulfire. So whatever element you need, because it will go by your action skill element, so use whichever one is best for the situation you're in. So for the main tree, it's Mythical Assault. First, it's Violent Tapestry, which is one of the most important talents. You can also get an increase to this with the Nimbus class mod. Mine doesn't have it on. I think if I could find a better rule, that'd probably be good, just to apply faster and have it, be guaranteed to apply it on anything that gets in the cloud very quickly. So this is basically just a status effect chance increase off rush stacks. So very good. It can get, getting 20 rush stacks, it's going to increase your chance by a lot. Now, Do Harm is something that's synergized with Ties That Bind. So this basically off rush stacks increases your action skill damage for every stack. Now, you would think Ties That Bind don't damage stuff. This wouldn't be something that happens. But the Ties That Bind, so when you phase grasp an enemy, the phase grasped enemy won't get any damage increases from Do Harm. But anything that is linked to that target, so that's taking 35% of damage that main target takes, will actually take increased damage from Do Harm. So you definitely want this. It'll increase the damage quite a bit, and this build is definitely much more focused on, even though you have that really insane damage with your status effects from the cloud, this build is still built more around using your weapons with that. Then we want Restlessness. or restless, 25% cooldown rate, always really good. You want to be able to grasp as many things as possible. Ascendant, which is for our lure to increase the radius of that, to pull everything together, get them in that cloud to get status effects on them. Then we have Laid Bare. Enemies take increased damage from all sources for a few seconds after being damaged by Amara's action skill. Now, as we were just talking about, the phase grasp enemy itself will not get this effect on them, but once you damage them and all the other link targets get damaged, it'll apply this to all of them. Then we have gun damage increase, and this doubles when you activate an action skill, so 40% when you actually have to use an action skill, pretty big. Awakening, your rush stacks gain increased effectiveness by 30%, which is really big. It helps with the do harm and the violent tapestry. Then Avatar, which increases your max bonus rush stacks, and basically when you use your ability within that cooldown window of using your first ability, you can use that ability a second time within that, and then you have to wait for a full cooldown. Then you can use basically 2 more. So next talent tree is a Fist of the Elements. We're going 5 into Anima, which is really big. It's a massive damage increase for this build because it's all based on status effects, which is most of our damage. Tempest, which I got 3 extra from my class mod, so 5 out of 5. This just increases your elemental damage and more shock damage, which is another reason that this build is very, very good, even extra good against any shield targets. That's why Slaughter Star 3000 and shield bosses, you're much better against them. Now, Wildfire is also super good. A 40% chance when you apply a status effect of something for it to spread to nearby targets. This will spread the entirety of the status effect. And say if we, apply our status effect from the cloud and it's doing 20k damage per second, it'll apply that entire status effect to things around it if it spreads. So then they'll be taking 20k seconds. So this is massive and really good for mobbing. Then we have Dread. Your gun damage decreases for a few seconds after an enemy is grasped. Whenever you kill a grasped enemy, your weapon is reloaded. Very good, just a decent damage increase. 3 out of 3 indiscriminate. Now, in the video in the Slaughter Star I did, I wasn't changing weapons much. You definitely can, and that's what this build is definitely built a little bit more around. So since I was at Slaughter Star and the Kill of the Wisp is so good against shields, I just kept using that. But if you want to use other weapons, because I don't think indiscriminate actually works. I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think it works with the Kill the Wisp because it's just a big ball. So I'm not exactly certain how that would proc. It could proc with like the lightning that comes off it, but this is really good for, say, recursions, which I do have one of those. Recursions are super good. And anything else, if you're using Crossroads, just any other good weapons you can use will be really good in this build. And basically how this works is, since your Nimbus Cloud is doing the status effects from your weapon, whatever weapon you have out when you use your ability is what it will take the status effect off of for Nimbus Cloud. So you can use your ability on Kilowasp and switch weapons to, say, recursion, then use your recursion till your next ability usage, which then you want to switch back to Kill of the Wisp, use your ability, then you could switch back if you want to do that. I didn't do that a lot in the video, but this build is very good for that. So say if you're doing any other stuff that, say, and recursion come in any element. So say if you're going against corrosive, you could use this one that has corrosive on it, or anything like that. So indiscriminate will work very well for that. We have one is Catharsis, which basically just blows up stuff when they die with status effects on them and applies it to targets around them. So that's very good. Then we have 2 out of 5 sustainment, which you heal for a percentage of your elemental damage dealt with your weapons. Really good, especially in this, using my Kill of the Wisp in Slaughter Star. I'm basically pretty much unkillable, because if you have one of those balls on, it's healing you a ridiculous amount. So that is also very good for keeping yourself alive. Now, with this build, you can also take a little bit away from here. You will pretty much have to lose sustainment and a few more. You usually lose sustainment in your 3 out of 3 indiscriminate. If you need corrosive, and then you'd put 5 into either Root to Rise or Clarity, and then you'd be able to get your corrosive damage to put massive corrosive status effects on enemies. So say if you're doing the Slaughter Shaft, you may want it for that, or bosses with armor, something like that. You'll have to lose, your sustainment and stuff like that to be able to get into it. But if you want to do that, you definitely can do that and change up your build a little bit. But that's pretty much the entire build. Let's go into the weapons a little bit more. You obviously want the Killer Wisp, the highest stats effect damage on any weapon in the game, which is why your Nimbus Cloud is going to apply such a big status effect on the target. We went over the Nimbus Legendary Class mod. My shield is a Transformer right now, with action skill cooldown rate increased by 20% for a short time after action skill end, which is very good for getting more phase grasps much quicker. This is also super good because it converts 100% of shock damage into shields, and basically, if you shoot this at the ground, normally it will damage you for quite a bit, but pretty much one blast of this will pretty much full heal my shields. So if you do need that for extra healing, that's also really good. If you don't have sustainment, you can just use this to keep your shields going. So that's really good. If you don't have sustainment, I would definitely recommend getting a Transformer to be able to keep yourself alive much easier. I'm just using a recurring hex. We'll go over the Terrified, why I really didn't use it that much in the footage you see in a minute. The Elemental Projector, you can use this. I really don't apply it to myself that much in this video. You can if you want to. It's going to give you a pretty big damage increase, but I don't really need it that much, and I don't think applying this to myself is really going to increase it that much for the stuff I'm doing in the footage. Now, the reason I'm not using Terrified that much, because I could definitely switch up my stuff and have Terrified on myself all the time, because I have a Kill of the Wisp with an extra chance to shoot another projectile or another projectile. The reason I didn't do this is because this specific Terrified is currently glitched. If you haven't seen one of my recent glitch videos, I show this. It'll basically randomly stack up this Anointed. As you'll see actually in the footage where I kill Gigamind, I stopped using it because I noticed it was glitched, and my Kill of the Wisp was always shooting 2 orbs. And this was just from doing Slaughter Shaft or Slaughter Star 3000 for 1 round and just Ghost applying terror to me. And that's what happened. It glitched. So I didn't want to really use that in the build too much, even though if you want to do this, it will start glitching at some point and permanently giving you extra projectiles. But if you want to use this, it's going to massively increase your power with this build, just because the Anointed's so strong. But I didn't want to do it too much. I didn't really want to use it in the footage because it'll start glitching and then just be a lot more powerful than the build would without this glitched extra projectile. So that's why I really didn't use it. But you can get a lot more power if you want to use it. And that's pretty much the entire build. Basically, you're just using your action skill as you normally would with grasp and using ties that bind. It's just going to apply massive status effects to the targets you're doing it to, and anything else that gets in the cloud, just doing massive amounts of damage every second, destroying everything. It's a really good build. It's actually a really solid overall build for killing bosses, for doing any of the slaughter shafts, for doing trials. It is a really solid build all around, and I think this will definitely be a viable build when the raid comes out, especially since everything in the raid, because it's Maliwan, is either going to have shields or armor, and then clearly health under the shield. But since you can have both those elements as Amara with that big status effect, it's going to be really good for the raid. And then just overall really good in the game. So subscribe if you want to see more Borderlands 3 content. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you think about this build. If you have any questions about where to get any of the items I talk about in this build, if you have any questions about how the build works or anything like that, leave it in the comments. I'll try to reply to everybody. And thanks for watching.